Welcome to the Weird Gig Podcast. I'm your host, Kara Kesselring. Here we are at episode lucky number 13 with my guest, New York City show drummer and percussionist, Jon Berger. Jon plays many different genres of music. His touring and live theater bio is vast, and most recently crisscrossed the country with the Roy Orbison Buddy Holly Hologram Tour. Jon and I discuss the balance of shows and family, what's under your kilt, and Jeff Goldblume? But first, Jon's weirdest gig story. I'm calling it In the Mood for Bossa Nova.
Hi, drummer Jon Berger here, sharing one of my many odd gigs I've experienced in my career. I guess this particular one could be categorized as a gig that turned weird. About 20 years ago, I was playing a production of Jesus Christ Superstar. As often happens during downtime at a show, musicians sometimes jam together. One day, our guitarist and I started to play some Brazilian jazz and discovered our mutual and deep love for this music. This continued a few times. Then one day, he told me that some of his friends were great Brazilian musicians and were looking for a drummer for a New Year's Eve gig. I already had a very well-paying American-style top 40 gig lined up. The gig he mentioned paid about half what I had in the books. I thought about it and decided to follow my heart and not the money as I usually do. I was at that time starting to play a few Brazilian gigs and also thought this as an opportunity to connect with more people in the New York City Brazilian music scene. I was able to find someone to cover my other better paying job. The Brazilians set up a rehearsal telling me we would be backing up a Bossa Nova singer for the first set and then play some classic tunes from their world and just have fun. Upon arrival at the rehearsal, I was a little surprised at how small the band was. The instrumentation was only guitar, accordion, and myself on drums and percussion. It is going to sound very small and thin, I thought. I reminded myself to keep a positive attitude. That was not difficult, as these two guys were super friendly and energetic. We played a bit, and it clicked right away. It became clear this was going to be a really fun gig. Then the singer arrived. She was pretty much the opposite. Zero personality. She knew the music and basically carried a tune. Her attempt to sound mellow and sultry just came across as bland and lifeless. I have never been one to complain, and I've certainly played with much worse. We arrived at the restaurant on New Year's Eve to a wonderful, accommodating, and welcoming staff. I survived the Bossa Nova set. The audience did not really notice the singer, which is probably a good thing. The next set started out, and we smiled at each other and excitingly dug into the music. The crowd sprung to their feet and began dancing. The band members and I were smiling from ear to ear and grooving hard. I thought to myself, this was the right choice. I was playing some music I was passionate about, putting this before the money. After a few tunes, we started to hear shouts from the audience. A few came close to the stage. Play such and such song. Do you guys know such and such, etc. Then the host came on stage and asked us to stop. She said, the audience wants you to play some other kinds of music. The band leaders were not sure how to react. I spoke up, reminding them that they hired us to play Brazilian music all night. She politely replied that we were great, but the people want some variety. The Brazilian guys looked confused. Then an audience member shouted, play some jazz. The accordion player looked at me and said, jazz? Like swing? Yes, I said. Do you guys know any jazz standards, I asked. They looked at each other stunned and scared. Let's just play a blues, I suggested. They remained paralyzed. Then suddenly, the accordion player smiled and jumped up and began playing the famous intro to Glenn Miller's In the Mood. I jumped in with the hi-hat, cymbal part. Suddenly, the party jumped back into gear and resumed dancing. However, the accordion player was playing like an endless loop. It was clear he only knew the first measures of this song. He just kept repeating them over and over. I started to sweat. So I tried helping him by at least calling out some blues chord changes. Go to the 4 chord. Go to the 5 chord. Go to the 1 chord. I might as well have been speaking Japanese. He did not respond to my prompts. He was stuck in the loop. After a while, some of the dancing crowd was looking back at us, wondering what was happening. I felt as if I was in a bad dream. All my powers of positivity drained from me. I was getting angrier by the second. Behind me was a picture glass window. I started fantasizing about leaving my drums behind and jumping out the window of the street and running home. I completely blocked out the rest of the night. I probably drank way too much. All I remember is we were fed and did get paid. When I returned to the Jesus Christ Superstar pit, I told my guitarist friend the tale. He just fell on the floor to laughing. We often would repeat that ill-fated line and would roar with laughter every time. Jazz? You mean like swing? My wife was pregnant with our first and only child right at that time, so in many ways my priorities changed regarding following my heart versus how much a gig pays. But thanks to my many great teachers, I've learned to put my heart into everything I do. And as a drummer, I hope to always get the listeners up off their chairs and dancing.
We'll be right back with more from Jon Berger. So Jon Berger, you're with me on the Weird Gig podcast. We're doing it.
How weird.
So weird. Weird year, weird musicians doing weird things.
I'm a drummer and a percussionist. You know, my career has mostly been around, playing Broadway shows. My private teacher in high school basically said it, it's clear I'm going to be a professional musician. So if you want to work, you really need to, develop your percussion skills. It was a great thing that he suggested, and I went to a great school. And just by coincidence, a classmate got a call looking for percussionists for a tour of a Broadway show. That's kind of how I fell into it. I mean, like most people, I went to school near New York City. I wanted to be I enjoy playing a lot of styles of music, which I still do, but I wanted to be like a studio musician, a touring musician. I wanted to play in, hard rock bands and play with Weather Report and all the, like typical musicians, and be the on-call studio guy. And someone said they needed percussionists for a Broadway show. And I went on the road right after music school. I went on the road and kind of fell into that world and connected with conductors and musicians. And after many, many years on the road, one of the conductors from Cats recommended me to the drummer to sub there. And I kind of broke into the scene in New York. To me, I call myself a multilinguist. I love traveling, and when I teach, I talk to my students about that we're learning musical languages. It's not like, how do you play this beat or that beat? It's like learning a language and immersing yourself in that culture. And being around New York, you have so many gigs, you end up playing with people on a very high level from those different musical countries. So,
Right.
you really have a lot of opportunities to immerse yourself in these different styles, which is, it's wonderful.
Can you describe to the listeners what a hologram tour is?
The concept of this gig is that what would it be like to experience seeing these great artists from the past now? So they had a hologram of Roy Orbison and Buddy Holly performing with a live band behind it, and so it was interesting playing along with original tracks. So in a sense, we are playing with these original artists, although you're not interacting with them.
It's a ghost tour, live musicians playing with a ghost.
Mike Preen, wonderful bass player that was on the tour with me, we got along really well. And the music of Buddy Holly and Roy Orbison for a rhythm section is pretty straightforward and not really the highest energy, but the musical supervisor said, we're the ones really bringing life to the tour. So, want us not only to move, but put energy into it. And, you don't want to overdo it or play things out of the style of the music. But at one point, we were getting kind of comfortable, and the bass player and I kind of launched into something a little bit more aggressive. And we were like, yeah, and we just started doing that. Every night we started doing this. And then we were talking about it. We said, a lot of times when you're backing like big name artists, you do something odd and they turn around, they're like, they yell at you. We said, this guy's not going to say anything. We could literally play reggae if we want. We're like, yeah.
And so when the musical supervisor came back, after a while, he was like, "Wow, you guys like," he said, "I love it." He understood some of the stuff was a little bit more than you maybe would do backing that kind of person, but it was an interesting thing because the singer never once turned around,
Mm-hmm.
and there are moments in the show where it just disappears and there's a puff of smoke. It was like this effect, and then Buddy Holly would come out. So, it was like the singer never said a word to us the whole tour. It's like awesome, it's a great gig, I love it.
They're taking hours of footage or recorded footage, splicing it together. As a theater musician, and especially the more recent shows, many of us are used to playing with a click, right? The either the drummer runs the click, and for the listeners at home, that would be like a metronome that glues the whole band together. How does the Hologram Tour work on a click when they were not originally performing with a click?
Yeah, well, it's a little weird at first because they use a thing called mapping. There's a way that you can actually program the metronome, the click track, to follow what's going on.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So Martin Axe, the supervisor who put all this stuff together, did the orchestrations. He had it's a painstaking task. I just did this for a soundtrack for a friend of mine, and it was a pain in the butt.
Yeah,
it took me hours and hours because it was a pianist playing with a singer. It was decent time, but not with it. So I had to the click was constantly moving. So in rehearsal, it's maddening because you hear the singer, and Buddy Holly especially was all over the place. And so in rehearsal, you're like playing and the click is getting faster and slower and faster and slower. Yeah. And, eventually what you learn to do is you listen to the singer and you just, put it right down the middle. Mm-hmm. And, and actually a year before I did the first tour, it was just Martin Axe conducting, myself, and we hired a 50-piece orchestra in each town. Wow. So only the rhythm section had the click and the rest of the orchestra didn't. And there were a couple of cities where they I don't know if they couldn't hear or they just were like making assumptions and stuff got off.
Right. I bet.
And it would a couple of times it happened, and it was just like we had to just like keep on going because the singer doesn't move. I didn't know this. Martin Axe had pointed out from studying the music, to do the orchestrations that Roy Orbison was actually unbeknownst to a lot of people, is a very strong rhythm guitar player. So his time was really solid. Mm-hmm. And Buddy Holly was just like all over the place. I mean, if you listen to this stuff with a click, it would blow your mind. It's just mm-hmm. like it's like someone's drunk and on too much caffeine at the same time. It's all over the place.
Oh, I bet.
There was this folk group, I don't know, a New York folk group called the Washington Squares, and I went to a mountaintop festival outside of Zurich for 2 days. And I mean, I did a lot of touring in Europe, but that was a far trip for just 2 days.
Yeah, that's that's
I think I slept for a week straight when I got home. I was so suddenly looking at this beautiful snow-capped mountain playing this music, and suddenly I'm back on my couch. I'm like, what just happened? 1990 through 1996, I did a whole bunch of tours, Broadway shows for this German producer, and I was going to Europe a lot, back and forth. I did 7 tours for them. Meeting. I mean, there's certain aspects of touring that gets a little bit tiring, but it's like, to me, it's just meeting people. I mean, this last mm-hmm. tour, a lot of times my favorite thing to do was just go out and, go to a bar or restaurant and just talk to locals. And
yeah,
you're covering a lot of ground and just meeting people from all over the place. And mm-hmm. it's really fun. The bartenders and the locals and the people in the hotels. It's just
trying food in the hang with the band. The hang is super fun.
I got called to play. I was in a Revolutionary War outfit, playing a field drum in front of a bank. It was, the bank was like Colonial Savings or something. It's like what, you really want just a drummer for an hour? And what am I gonna do?
That's weird.
It's like, okay, you're going to pay me to do that, fine. And, this big, thick outfit. This wasn't exactly a gig because I wasn't getting paid, but I was teaching drums for a Scottish pipe band. And I really love this style of snare drumming. It's a very specific thing, really beautiful style of snare drum. If anyone's ever listened to this, and bagpipes people don't like so much, but the drumming's amazing. Anyway, I really got into it, and they said, "Why don't you join the band?" And so I ended up doing this competition. It was the Scottish Delco Games, which I never even heard about, out in Delaware. And these athletes and bands from Scotland, come in, and some from the U.S. And so we was a low-level band, but we competed in this thing, and it was dead of summer. Probably it was hot as hell, and I had to wear this kilt, which is this thick, scratchy outfit. and so we did our thing, we played, and then we were going to see, he said, "Oh, this band is amazing. It's a really high level band. You got to see these drummers." So I was going to climb over the fence to go see them, and there's this guy like leans down, he's like looking up my kilt, and I'm like, what the hell? I almost kicked him in the head. Like, what's your problem? Here's this Jewish guy with my big nose wearing a kilt. I find out this guy's from Scotland, and he's fascinated, and he wanted to take my picture. And the first thing he says to me is, this thick accent is, "No, man, you don't wear nothing under your kilt." I was wearing shorts under my kilt. He's like, "Let's look at under my kilt." But he had to take a picture of me in the kilt to show his friends back home.
That's hilarious.
I was doing a Broadway show in New York, and it was like daylight savings time, and this guitar sub opened up the pit and walked into the show in full stream because he was sitting on the couch in the green room. "Oh, where is everybody? Boy, it's kind of quiet." The show had already started. Martin acts, actually. Martin looks down like, "Oh, hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us." He's like, "Shit."
At least he was cool about it, but oh my gosh, that is the worst nightmare dream for me.
It's worse when it's not a dream.
Well, yeah.
That happens to you.
Oh, yeah. In my mind, unforgivable. I think I would not be able to forgive myself.
Yeah, but that thing for anyone that tours, it's maddening when it's, I'm trying to keep track, and
right.
I'll have alerts in my phone, and
right.
It's really hard to keep track of sometimes.
And I think that for listeners who are not from the music world, if you've got a corporate job and you're an accountant, and you show up at the same place and you do the same job at the same time, the same days of the week, you have to have a certain sensibility as a human to be able to have such a flexible, strange life.
It takes a certain kind of person. I mean, some people like that regiment, and I don't know about you, Kara, but sometimes I'm envious of people that have that sort of set schedule. Very, very often when things were normal, you look at your calendar, it's completely blank, and 2 weeks
right.
in, it's like you can't keep your head on straight. You're so busy, I played with Donna Summers on December 3rd, I think it was. It was just completely out of the blue. And this is one of those crazy freelance moments. I was subbing My Fair Lady on Broadway. The show had closed. It was really challenging and a beautiful show. So this was months and months later. Mm-hmm. Not only was I learned that it was this event at the Bitter End in New York, playing with Donna Summers, which was like really, really cool. And literally as I'm getting out the door, I get a call from the contractor for the brand new tour of My Fair Lady that the drummer's his mom was in dire straits, and could I come to Syracuse and do the Sitzprobe? This is when the band, you play through the cast for the first time. The next day, come to Syracuse. So while I'm like, my head's like fired up just to, play great for Donna Summers, and I'm like, I haven't played My Fair Lady. It's a huge drum and percussion book, and I'm like, sure, of course, I'll do it. You put me on a flight at 6 a.m. So the entire ride on the West Side Highway down, I'm on the phone, getting out of a few other gigs so I could go to Syracuse the next day. And, just about as I got to Manhattan, a friend of mine said, I'll cover that gig for you. And, had a great time, backing this. She's still 70 something years old, still like, she's singing her butt off. The next morning, I fire it up on coffee and relearn, practicing for a few hours before the rehearsal to, in front of all the music staff, that whole thing, it was like no pressure. It was like huge. I mean, this is a really hard book. I hadn't played in like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. So, it's like, as you know, the life of a few, you just never know, completely out of the blue, these like,
Right.
And I kind of thrive on that. It's been my life for so many years. I kind of thrive on that kind of, just dive out of the plane without a parachute and you're
adrenaline. It's the adrenaline, baby.
Yeah,
it's good.
You focus like each time you just like that laser focus and just make it happen. Maybe relate those who haven't seen Jersey Boys. The drummer is almost featured in the show. It's just this odd thing they did where the drummer is on this moving platform and you're very visible. You're moving around the stage and spinning around, and so anybody that comes to see the show, they're going to know who the drummer is. They can see you constantly. So in New York, we constantly have celebrities and backstage, and sometimes they want to come for a tour. But often what they would do is someone would bring them backstage through the theater. So when the band would finish, the band has this little small feature at the end of the show, and then we come down. In New York, we'd come down the stairs to the dressing room, and we'd constantly pass these celebrities that were being brought up to the stage. So as I said, I'm playing the show. I'm extremely visible. And right before the show, someone said, Richie Zambora, the guitarist from Bon Jovi's here. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. It's fine. Great. Wonderful. Honestly, I personally hate, unless I invite someone, I hate when people tell me that so-and-so's in the audience, because it's just, I find it very distracting. I'd rather not know.
Right.
So even though saying as a musician is like, whatever, and I felt like I played a really good show. Anyway, I finished playing, I come down the stairs, and suddenly there's Richie Zambora. And he's got a big smile on his face, and he puts out his hand and shakes it and says to me, "Wow, man, how do you sing like that?" And it was like, and he's really sincere. And I said, "Oh, nice to meet you." And I kept on walking. And I said, "Man, I should have said to him, man, AC/DC is my favorite band." So, I mean, it was like, who did he think I was? And so, of course, as musicians are, for the next several months, the band would, every time they'd see me, they go, "Jon, man, how do you sing like that?" Especially at Jersey Boys, we, constantly run, because also when you leave the theater, it's a very, very narrow space down to the stage doors. So when celebrities would come up the stairs, we're constantly passing by. And my wife always loved this one, is Jeff Goldblume happened to be there one show. And, everyone knows Jeff Goldblume, and he's like 9 feet tall and distinctive look. So he's standing in the bottom of the stairs, and everyone's exiting. The cast, the band, we're all leaving. And he's standing there, and he's putting out his hand. And every single person from the company that came, he'd shake his hand. "Hi, Jeff Goldblume. Hi, Jeff Goldblume. Hi. Yeah, we know who you are." Oh, we started one show. This was early in the run, and one of the actors said to me, the drummer from Aerosmith, Joey Kramer. He goes, "Joey Kramer's here, man. I'm like, okay, great, that's fine, And so after the show, he grabs me. He goes, "We got to go meet him." I didn't realize that Bobby used to play drums, so he had some drumsticks. So we run out, and the crowd's screaming. He wants Bobby's autograph, and he runs by the crowd, and there's Joey Kramer, like with his girlfriend or wife, whatever. And he's just like all excited. He goes, "Hey, Bobby, so nice to meet you. Johnny was playing drums." And the thing that cracked me up more than anything is he was so disinterested, and his girlfriend, his wife, was jumping up and down so excited, and he was just kind of looking at her like, "Can we get out of here?" Like freaking Broadway shows. It was as if she dragged him to the thing.
Right.
And I love that more than anything, more than the fact that I'm meeting. I think I love Joey Kramer. He's a great drummer. I love what he did with Smith. But to me, that was so funny that he was just like Broadway crap. He couldn't care less. It was fantastic. The coolest thing was when I was in Amsterdam, I didn't know till after the show, but a very close friend of mine and I were playing Vita in Europe, and I was playing drums, playing percussion, and this dancer said she went to a club last night and met this American drummer, and I'm bringing him to the show. I'm like, cool, whatever. Did the show, but afterwards I end up in the dining room, and it was Bernard Purdie, and I ended up hanging out like the whole night with Bernard Purdie, just me and him. And the band was like, "Why didn't you call us?" I'm like, "Call you? I spent the whole night with Bernard Purdie, just hanging out." It's like, when does that happen? I had them all to myself, and it was, and I was thrilled to death that I didn't know who he was, because I wouldn't have played well. He was most well known for being Aretha Franklin's drummer, and on so many of her iconic hits. And then he became really they call him the Godfather of funk. I mean, he just the way that he played, R&B and funk was just very unique and influenced so many people. And then he's been called one of the most recorded drummers in history. He's just on thousands and thousands of records outside of Aretha. I mean, he was just this in-demand drummer for so long. He's still active. He's in his 70s and still playing. But he was going back to town. It was like, I don't know, it's like midnight. He goes, "You want to share a cab?" And I said yes. I was already at the hotel, but I'm like, he wants to hang. So we just walked around Amsterdam and just talked. It was pretty amazing. But those kind of, like they say, only on the road, those kind of things happen. I got a great opportunity to go on tour. My daughter was 2. It was a Broadway contractor called me, and one of the top Broadway contractors, and was like, I can't turn down this opportunity. He's also a drummer, and it's just like so many reasons not to. There was so many reasons that I should take this tour, and my wife agreed. But my daughter was 2 years old, and we talk about this day. I was getting dressed. We were playing the Kennedy Center, and I'm getting dressed to walk over to work, and she's like, she's got a toy stuck up her nose. What do I do? And I'm like, feeling like what am I don't know. I got to go to work. I'm sorry. I felt like such a crappy dad at that moment. I know it's just a silly little thing, but it's like these kind of things that pull at you when you're a little bit older. That
right.
It
true.
Makes it causes some stress, and so in that sense, I think. In general, I think it's perhaps a young person's game. And a lot of people I've seen that are out, that are older, I'm certainly older, but people that have going out for long tours, a lot of them they're single, they're divorced or they're, widowed or whatever. And,
right.
and it certainly makes it easier. In December, I went down to Florida, this theater that I've worked at a few times. And I actually did an outdoor holiday show.
That's great.
My wife and I drove down. It was amazing. We had built a stage in front of the theater. It's a 4-person band, on a platform on one side and 5 singers. And
yeah,
it was amazing. It was just incredible to perform for people again. Everyone was spread out. They took people's temperature. They came in, they had to wear masks, and all done very safely. And it was overwhelming, to be able to perform for people again, for a month. That was something. Got a small taste of that. It was really nice.
Many thanks to my friend Jon for joining me. You can find out more about Jon on his website, www.jonbergerdrums.com. And that's Jon, Jon. As we wrap up today, we're taking the show out with a live recording of Diana Hickman at New Blue in New York City with Jon on drums. The song is called Quite Like This. The pod will be taking a few weeks off so you can get caught up on your Weird Gig podcast binging if you're a few episodes behind. Make sure to like the Weird Gig podcast on Facebook, subscribe, sponsor, and spread the word. The Weird Gig podcast song is performed by Patrick Williams and Vance Okershevsky, and of course, yours truly. Please be advised that this broadcast is intended to include a fair report or summary or commentary by one or more independent content providers. Any opinion expressed during this broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views of anyone else involved in conducting or presenting these interviews. Until next time, come for the stories, stay for the weird.
Losing